it's 7 according to my clock, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with a quick prayer. Thank you, Lord, for this day, for all of our many blessings. Be with us as we discuss your word and as we discuss problems in our community that we need to find solutions to. Help us to know the right thing to do. Guide us in all that we do. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And I'd like to start with a couple of scriptures. Some of these were mentioned within the chapters that we are covering tonight. The first one is from James, chapter 2, verse 20. And it kind of goes with their thoughts that it's not just enough to be against racism. You need to act. You need to do something. So James in verse 20 says, "You fool, do you want to be shown that faith without actions is useless?" So that's how we show our faith, by acting and by doing. The other one I wanted to mention comes from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 15. It says, "See that no one pays back wrong for wrong, but at all times make it your aim to do good to one another and to all people." So he's not saying do good just to all Christians or just do good to, your own community, but you're to be good to all people. And I think that would include minorities, obviously, if he's talking about all people, so that we need to be good to everyone. I often think with all these verses like this in the Bible, how anyone ever looked at the Bible and thought God approved of slavery. I really don't have a hard time getting that. I mean, I know the verses they quote and things they go to, but it's all taken out of context. It's just anyway. And the last one is Revelations. I normally don't go to Revelations because I don't really understand it all that well. I'm not sure anyone does, but Revelation 7, verse 9. "After this I looked, and there was an enormous crowd. No one could count all the people. They were from every race, tribe, nation, and language. And they stood in front of the throne and of the Lamb, dressed in white robes and holding palm branches in their hands." So obviously, everyone's going to be there. All races are included. Mm-hmm. And everyone is going to be there. So we don't want to be excluding anyone here on earth. Now, chapter 14 was kind of about patriotism. How do you feel about America? And can you understand why some people don't feel what I'll call super patriotic about this country? I've had such a good life here that actually, you play the Star Spangled Banner, I'm almost in tears. It just really, I get overwhelmed with emotion, almost more than anything else. And I'm not really sure why that, much more than I do at a church service, which I would like it to be the other way around. But, it just doesn't, I guess your emotions are what your emotions are. But anyway, so I do feel very patriotic about this country. But I do realize, because even though it gave me an excellent life, it has not treated everyone as well as I have been treated, obviously. So, so how should we deal with America's past? Should we teach it? What should we teach? Any comments?
Well, I would definitely agree that the teaching, it needs to be taught, and it needs to be taught differently. I remember growing up, the textbooks that I had did not present the subject, I think, as comprehensively or as accurately, nearly as accurate as it should have been.
No, I agree. Things were kind of glossed over, kind of given what I'll call, even though I love this movie, the Gone with the Wind treatment, where everyone is happy and everyone's treated well, and they're part of the family and all that sort of stuff. But but that obviously is not how slavery was. I do think, though, people who criticize America, not that we necessarily wrong, but I think they need to think that, you know, we are not unique in this kind of background. People overrunning other countries and taking over other groups, making them slaves, you know, fighting, trying to get rid of people they don't like. That's gone on since, I guess, Cain and Abel. I mean, you know, that's been going on for a long time. So America definitely isn't unique, but that shouldn't give us a pass just because we're like everyone else. That we should try to be better.
I am, you know, and looking back at America's history, and there is a school of thought now that about, you know, our founding fathers and the fact that most of them were slave owners. And should we even honor them at all because they were slave owners? And I have a hard time, as you know, I'm vehemently against slavery. I think all of you guys could understand that. But I have a hard time judging people from the past by today's standards.
I agree with you completely. I think they should still be taught. I also think we're all sin. So we all have faults. You're never going to find any leader that doesn't have fault somewhere if you look hard enough. Probably you don't even have to look that hard to find them. But that doesn't necessarily negate the good things or the great things that they did. And it was a completely different time. Slavery, it was really just starting to become a little before this. Well, not as far back as the Revolution, it wasn't. There were abolitionists, of course, all along, but not that many. No, everyone kind of just looked at it that slavery's just always been around. That's just the way things are, you know, and don't think anything odd about it. So I definitely think they should be taught. I heard someone say once that we probably should stop naming anything after people. You know, name the school after the street it's on, or name different things that we just, you know, because so many of the people we put up, we find out later, you know, they have real problems. But of course, I still think it should be taught. But I think a more comprehensive, like what Claire was saying, in other words, it really needs to be pointed out how horrible slavery actually was. You know, when you think about it back then, you think, well, you know, they brought them over on ships, but you think, you know, that's a cruise. No, they, you know, it wasn't anything like that for them. They were chained down below, you know, it's crowded and everything like that. And these things I think need to be pointed out. I think we know much more now from television and movies that have been made about it that bring a lot of these points that have been left out of the classroom that we're becoming much more aware of. And I think that's good. I think we need to know what it was really. And I think we probably don't even know the depths of what it was really like.
I do remember when Roots came out, that was a milestone in terms of, you know, I was young at the time, but it really presented to me a lot of issues that I had no idea. And, you know, we need to have more instances where either through art or through music or through, you know, film, something that we can reach people who might not otherwise sit down with a history book and read it.
I think this country has a lot of the kind of an infrastructure down. We have the Declaration of Independence, which declares all people equal, even though they didn't apply it back then. We do feel that all people are equal with inalienable rights. We have the 13th Amendment, finally, which gave everyone citizenship and they could vote. We have the Civil Rights Act. We abolished Jim Crow. So we've done a lot of the right things and have the right framework of what we're striving for. I think, was it in the book where it said Martin Luther King was saying, we just haven't achieved our promise yet. You
Right.
know, the promise in the Declaration of Independence in our past, we haven't gotten all the way there yet. You know, it's, and another thing he was talking about in the chapter too was cashing a check. You know, the founding fathers made this promise that we all have these rights. Well, we've come to cash a check. We want our, you know, we want to have those rights. So yeah, here it is on page 150. He asked America to finally embody the ideals the founders expressed. So even Martin Luther King realizes that people with flawed pasts who were slave owners could still have some good ideas, you know, and good expressions. And we just need to, you know, he argued that writing the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the founders were writing a promissory note to every American of all races. But this promissory note, all Americans are guaranteed an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, of course, has not happened for everyone. We still have to try to do better.
We're a work in progress.
Definitely.
We always have been, and we always will be as a as an individual, as a community, as a state, as a country. Work in progress.
And she also touched on in this chapter, you know, the controversy about kneeling during the national anthem and and things like that. Even though I well up in tears when I hear the national anthem, it doesn't bother me if they're kneeling or whatever. The thing that bothers me most is they don't sing it like it was written. Now that bothers me, but it's just a song. It's like if people burn the flag, I don't particularly like that, but it's just a piece of cloth. It represents something, but even if you burn it, you're not burning what it represents. These are things that shouldn't be made into, I guess, like idols or something like that. And I think people who've been left out, this is a way to catch people's attention. They could stand on the street corner yelling for days and no one's going to pay any attention. But you do something this provocative, people stop and listen or wonder what you're doing and why you're doing it.
You know, the whole kneeling during the national anthem, when you're kneeling, you are in a weakened position. You are in a vulnerable position when you're kneeling and everybody else is standing around you. And the folks that first started that was part of, they were very much aware of that. They were very much aware of that. So
That's true, because they could have just as easily done something different, like remain standing but face the other way, turn their backs. Kneeling is purposely, you kneel before God.
You do. You do.
So
Brenda Kidd wrote her devotional about the flag lowering at Disney World and the silence in the people who were so, it was like this very respectful moment. And I appreciate that, you know, and I do think symbols are important. You know, we have bread and wine, and those are important symbols. And so I feel like I understand why the people kneel, but I also feel very strongly that there are people who risk their lives for our country, and for them particularly, I think that is a hard thing, because it says because, there's this love for our country with all of its vulnerability, all of its problems. I think that's part of it.
Well, I know it did upset a lot of people, and I do think I stand silent. They're the flag, I cross, pledge allegiance, do all those things. But I think that when you do that, it's not quite as bad as people are making it out to be, that they're not grateful for what they have, because a lot of the ones doing it, of course, are young men who are very well compensated, for what they're doing. And so people think it's kind of hypocritical, but they want people to realize that there's others who need help, that, that don't have the opportunities they've had. And I know why some people don't like it. They want to watch a football game and they don't want to be preached at. They want mindless entertainment, that can take the mind off everything. So I see both points of view, but it doesn't bother me as much as it seems to bother a lot of people.
Well, and I don't know anything about many of those folks, but I would say that there's lots of ways to express your feelings about things. You can go and help children that are underprivileged, and there's lots of ways to try to make the world better, and try to make our country better. And I would hope that they would also see the other side about how hurtful that is to some people. And it is about their love, people who have loved our country and served our country. I think that is the hurtful spot.
Yes, because they deserve our respect.
Mhm.
Definitely. I think one of the most shameful things, well, I shouldn't say that, we've done lots of shameful things in this country, but I thought it was awful how we treated the Vietnam vets when they came back home. I thought that was absolutely horrible, especially when you consider that most of those young men over there, they didn't volunteer to go over there. They were drafted and made to go over there, and then to be treated like that when they come back, I thought was a very shameful thing. I was reading a article in the newspaper, editorial, and she was talking about, I think it was 1982, I left the paper downstairs. In Pittsburgh, she went down to see a parade honoring Vietnam veterans. They finally, by 1982, were having a parade in Pittsburgh to honor the Vietnam veterans. And how a lot of people turned out, and a lot of people, I think, are really sorry with how they were treated, when they came back. I thought it was another sad thing in our history that should not have happened. Any other comments on?
I think, I guess the last thing that I'd like to say about it is that oftentimes we are quick to make judgments about what people's intents are, and to take the time to find out what the thoughts and the feelings really are, what the intent really was on some actions and stuff. So, I get slapped in the face with that all the time with kids at school, with high schoolers, because the behavior looks like one thing, but when you stop and explore it a little bit, then you find out there's
more to the story.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Kind of like what the Paul Harvey said, and now for the rest of the story, he tells something and you find out what was behind it. I did want to read the last sentence in chapter 14. It says, focused on God, we can allow ourselves to criticize America, not because we hate it, but precisely because we love it, see it for what it is, and see it for what it could be. And I think that's a very, very good perspective. I think something else on the patriotism and things, as I've said, I don't know very many the Black people, and most of the ones I know are immigrants. They came here from somewhere else. Guy who worked with Bernie out in California had come from Mozambique. He'd gone through Germany and finally got here. He spoke like 5 languages. He learned a language every time as he moved around. Well, Mozambique was in the middle of a horrible civil war. So life here, even with racism, was better than life where he came from. And I think that's what a lot of the immigrants do. It's like, you know, they don't want to be treated that way, obviously. And, but they also know they have a lot more opportunities to succeed and do things here than they would have had where they came from. So it works both ways here. You know, it is a land of opportunity.
I was wondering if anyone had read about I think CNN was reporting on a Catholic school in New York City that the white headmaster was resigning because he had told a Black student to kneel and apologize the African way. Has anyone read about that in the news?
Heard about it, but I didn't follow up on it.
Yeah.
No, I hadn't heard about it.
Yeah, that's just in the news, was just in the news today.
Oh,
I haven't seen today's.
no, I missed that. So anyway, chapter 15. This is about integrating churches. And the authors feel that churches would be best if they were integrated, although they did think there are still reasons for maybe an all-Black church. The Black church, of course, was started back when they weren't allowed to come to the white churches, so they started their own churches. It's also a place where they could meet and organize, try to get things done politically. That's where a whole lot of, you know, the civil rights marches and things like that came out of the Black church, doing that. And it was also a place where they could be themselves. They didn't have to, you know, they could be comfortable and be themselves. And they were saying that there's really no need for an all-white church. Any comments?
I only know that, you know, with my total ignorance, I thought when I left Virginia that I would move here and I would just find a church exactly like, you know, BACC, and we'd be good to go. And I have visited all white churches, and I have found that each one differs so vastly every time I go from one to another that I just can't even fathom if we can't get people who are all white to intermingle, then how are we going to add another layer of complexity onto that? I just don't understand. I don't understand, I guess, you know, how vast the interpretation of Christianity is.
Oh, I've got a lot of different churches and lived a lot over the country. Yes, it's huge. When Bernie and I moved to Delaware, we had been going to independent Christian churches since we were married out in California and at Penn State, California. Anyway, when we moved to Delaware, we were looking for another independent Christian church. So we went and visited one, and it had about, maybe 10 people. So they're very nice and everything like that. And next Sunday we went to another one, and it had about 10 people. And so Bernie and I are wondering, why don't they join forces, you know? Because supposedly they believe the same things. It's not like a difference between a Presbyterian, you know, and a Baptist church or anything like that. They were same thing. But it was a personal disagreement between someone in the congregation that had split the congregation in two. And, these things happen. I think it's one thing I really like about Bonaire, because the beliefs of people in this church run the gamut from basically fundamental to, well, we'll just say very liberal at the other end. But we all get along. And I think that's really hard to do. And I think we have managed to do that. I do have a question. They were saying, the ideal thing is for your church to reflect the community with which you're in. What is the racial makeup of Bonaire? Does anyone know?
We did a demographic study when we did the mission pathways, and actually there's quite a mix. It's not predominantly, it's not overwhelming any particular race. There's
Okay.
quite a large population of Hispanic. There's also a large population of African Americans, and then there are more white people, but it's not overwhelmingly.
Mhm.
It's interesting, Cindy. What about the actual membership of Bonaire? Because I know that we have people from all over, and we're about 5 or 6 miles away. There's certainly a church closer to us than Bonaire is. But we have some people way out in the country, but within our own demographics, because it's not just the little Bonaire community that comes to Bonaire Christian Church.
Have any of y'all ever gone to an African-American church?
Mhm. No.
Can you tell me your
Across the
experiences?
street from the seminary.
I've only been on services on television and in movies.
Yeah.
And they know how to say hallelujah.
And you better bring your lunch.
Yeah.
When we ask the question about integrating the churches, it is, I think, less about racism than it is about how we worship.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has a whole lot to do with it. And that's part of what was it, Emerson and Smith, who did the sociologists that were doing the research, that people like to be with others who are like them, who like the same sort of things that they do, and the same style of worship. And they gave a couple of examples of churches that did start to integrate, and they lost some people because they didn't feel like it was their church anymore. Once they started incorporating a different kind of music and a different style of doing things, that longtime members had a real hard time with that because it didn't seem like their church anymore. And so they feel it's really almost hopeless to hope to integrate the churches completely, because it's just, and I think a part of it is worship style. I know when I was chairman of the worship committee, I did find out that the order of worship is sacrosanct and not to be changed. And, doing certain things certain ways. And actually, that's true in most churches. If you go to most churches, the service is the same order every single Sunday, year after year. Very few really, change it up, and you get used to it. So, it seems really weird, when it doesn't. It's like, is it the summer that we normally don't do both the Lord's Prayer and the doxology, or one of them, where we cut one of or the Gloria Patri, and that feels weird after we've done it all winter, not to do everything all summer too.
Yeah.
But
Of course, now we're not doing any of it.
yeah.
I think it is very cultural. You have a culture, and it's church is just so social, because at work, we had blacks and whites and Asians and gay and straight and everybody working together. And it never was the blacks or the Asians or the whites or whatever. It was individuals that always caused the problem, and it wasn't
Yes.
having to do with their race or anything else. But work was not social, and church is social,
Hmm.
very social. And so it's cultural. And so that's why Claire visits all of these churches, and they aren't the culture. They aren't the social society that she's comfortable with, even though they're white or, mixed or whatever. And so we have people who moved to Arizona, the whites, and they never found a church that they compared with Bonaire Christian Church. And so it was just, that was the little community that you kind of grew up in. And so many people have grown up in Bonaire Christian Church and stayed or come back or whatever. So it's a community that you're forming, and communities usually like things. And even within our community, we have different groups, that believe or think or do different activities, or like to do different things. Bernie likes to make beer.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
So,
And he likes to drink it too. So.
right.
He doesn't make it just to make it. But I think different worship styles are, not with this study, but I read another one where a lot of younger folk, they don't really want a church building. They don't want the responsibility of keeping up a church building. They would rather rent a venue to have their, church services and then meet outside for other things, not have an actual church building. And then I think about when I was in Texas and the church that Keith and Victoria went to. Well, it was one of those mega churches. And, but it had the drums and the band and the up on stage and the words.
And the fog machines. Yeah, I can't place that in a
No,
church.
they didn't have fog machines, man. I guess they hadn't gone that far yet. There were no fog machines. The interesting thing I thought about it, they did not pass a offering plate at all during the service. So I guess people just pledged, but it was a huge church. And it was fine going there, but that's not really the kind of service I'm real comfortable with. I do like the hymns that I'm familiar with. I like to think I'd be flexible enough that if we did have some Black families join our church, that we would incorporate some other music in with ours. And you get used to things too, if you keep going. So I don't know how we would go about trying to get more diverse membership. I think we have very diverse membership on the way we think. There are Democrats and Republicans both in this church. So, and we get along in church, but in that, so.
I think it has to be a personal invitation. If we have Black friends, Black colleagues, invite them to church. They might not know that Bonaire Christian Church is the way we are and welcoming to all. So I think it has to start with a personal invitation.
One of the things that I liked when we were interviewing or having the meet and greet with David, and someone asked him the question about how to bring more young people into the church. And he said, go to where they are. They might not be coming here, but go out, do things in the community where you meet people, other people, young people, or a mixed groups of race or cultures or whatever, and then tell them about the church there, or just get to know them and get to be friends somehow with that. I think that one of the things that the book said was, don't go up knocking on doors and saying, I want you to be my Black friend, or young people and say, I want you to be my young friend. Come to church with me. I don't think that wouldn't get me there.
No, I don't think that would go. I don't think that would go over well with most.
I think we would.
Most people.
I think we need to make a really big effort to greet and welcome, if we had an African American or come to the church, back in the 90s, we invited an interracial couple to come to the church. And the wife was the African American, and she was so interested in finding a church. Nobody spoke to them with the exception of Polly Craft. Polly Craft jumped up from her bench and ran over and introduced herself. And I mentioned it to somebody, sometime after that. And I said, I was really kind of hurt and upset because, we had invited, this couple.
Mhm.
And the reply I got was, well, it probably would have been better if they had not been interracial couple. If they had just been a Black couple, they might have been a better thing. And this was 93, 94, something like that.
Well, I think that's part when someone who was saying that the church is a social thing. And we have friends there. And so we get caught up in talking with our friends at church that I think sometimes we forget to greet and see the new people that have come, and that because we like talking with our friends, catching up and things like that. So I think that is something we have to be careful about trying to.
Philip Burkhalter was always good about, getting to a visitor. And
I think, Joe, that a lot of that has to do with the personality. My cousin has never met someone he can't just walk straight up to and start talking to. And the anxiety I feel in that situation, there's a chance I will pass out on the person.
Often we'll see people and we'll say, is that person new or just that I know them? But it doesn't really matter. You go up and, you can embarrass yourself by talking with someone and saying, and what's your name? And they'll say, I've been going to this church for 10 years, kind of a thing. But sometimes you just embarrass yourself.
Yeah. I usually come up to them and say, I don't think I know you, so I don't know. Have you been coming here or are you new? I travel a lot. That's what I tell them. I travel a lot, so I don't know everyone here.
Well, I'm
Make an excuse.
I don't have a very good mind now. I don't remember things well anymore. So.
Oh, that's true. If I don't see them, every week or something like that, it just, I do forget. It's like my kids, if I think of a question that I want to ask them, and then when they got home from school, maybe 30 minutes later, I asked them, I don't know if I asked you this. And if I did ask you this, I don't know if you answered me. And if you did answer me, I don't know what you said. But here goes. What did you, and I do the question, because sometimes I just thought the question and thought I had asked it and I never had said it. Then other times, yes, I had asked them, 2 or 3 times actually.
But I think we had the discussion a long time ago in church when we were on church and, the worship committee or whatever. And it's that it doesn't matter who is new in the church. You should always, make an attempt to try to welcome them.
Yes.
And whether it doesn't matter Black or white or mixed or young or old or whatever, that you need to try to make an attempt to do that. And it is hard sometimes because you'll see someone and they'll be walking out the door and you'll kind of try to rush through the crowd and you can't make it. But we do have greeters at the front door. And Piper, you're on the keyboard.
Well, I will say, like when Bernie and I moved, when we were going to different churches, we often sat at the back the first time. And we usually tried to leave real early because we didn't really want to talk to people till we're kind of sure we're kind of interested in the church rather, and that. So I understand why people do that the first time, but we should really try to make an effort, and not just to greet Black people, obviously, anybody who comes in, as Susan was saying, we need to reach out to everyone.
I have discovered in my research here that if the minister is really good, the congregation comes in, sits, watches, doesn't say a word to anybody and leaves. But if the minister is not good, they will flock to you and welcome you and just beg you to come back next week, and then you know why.
Oh, goodness.
So Cindy, if we are not all that welcoming, it's because we listen to your sermon and enjoy it.
But you're not taking it to heart.
Well, I think at this point, I think, discussions like this help raise all of our awareness. A Black friend of mine came and visited at the church a number of years ago. I think for some reason, I wasn't able to sit with her. I think I was serving that morning as a deacon or something like that. So after the service ended, it was a couple of minutes before I could get over to her, and nobody came and spoke to her either. And so I think what our society's been through in recent years, especially this past year, I would hope the great majority of folks would be much more open to reaching out to folks that look different than us.
And another thing that might help is, for example, Joe, if we invite someone to church, a friend of ours, and we invite them to church, maybe during the announcements at the very beginning, we stand up and say, I want to welcome a friend of mine who's visiting our church today, so-and-so. And then the congregation will tie that person in with someone that they know and possibly be more comfortable going over and talking with them.
Right. Not this past summer, but the summer, because with Vacation Bible School, I guess it was in the summer of 19. And we had several families. The kids were from Black families and Hispanic families. And then some of them did come to the Sunday program, that next Sunday afterwards that the kids did. And I am hoping, I would assume that, those families were just as warmly welcomed as any other family. I was sitting over on the side and couldn't get to them, but I remember very much seeing them there. And so, those are wonderful opportunities to
Yes.
welcome folks from our
And
local.
we often miss them. We don't pay attention, and miss the opportunities. I've been to some churches, and with my memory, this would really help me out. All the members had name tags. So you could see if they had a name tag on, you knew they were a member, even if you hadn't met them before, or you could say, you must go to early service. I go to the second service, but anyway, I would find that very helpful to have people wearing a name tag. And I'd be willing to wear one too. So
We do that in our Miata Club, and it helps tremendously.
It would help even members of the church who aren't sure of your name. They've
Yes.
seen you 100 times, but can't, how often do you hear somebody's name in church? Nobody goes around introducing themselves. You hear about the elders or the deacons, their names are in the bulletin, but the guy that sits behind you, been sitting behind you all your life, just about, and you don't know his name.
Yeah.
Maybe it would even be helpful if the congregation doesn't want to wear them, to have the greeters wear them and the elders and the deacons wear them.
Those you can figure out. As I said, it's in the bulletin.
Well, not if you're a new person and you don't know which is Carl and which is Mike. So anyway, that's all off topic here, I guess.
Well, anyway, I think they can be helpful. Any other comments on integrating the church?
I think we often find ourselves talking about ways to keep our younger people involved, our young adults and our older teens. And I think this topic is very important to them, and they want more inclusivity. I know for my children, who are oddly enough 26 and 30 now somehow, this topic is important to them. And they want our church, every church, the church in general, to be more inclusive. Emily one day was walking to the parking lot and came back in and running back in. She was in her teens still then. And she said, Mom, I just got stopped in the parking lot by a couple who asked me, it was a gay couple, and they asked me if it was okay if they came in to our service, would they be welcome here? And I told them that it was okay. Was that correct? Are they welcome to come into our church? I said, yes, of course. Yes, they're welcome to come in. So she wasn't sure. She hoped she was correct in telling them that they were welcome to come into our church. I just think that, this is a topic that young adults are more concerned about, and that they want us to be more welcoming, and that when we become more welcoming and more inclusive, they're going to feel better about, being part of our church. That's something that's an important topic for that age group.
I
Well, we
think
kind of get set in our ways sometimes, and
I think the other thing with one of the activities that we mentioned earlier, I believe, is Vacation Bible School. And I know that I have seen young kids of other races, attend the Vacation Bible School. And when we advertise the Vacation Bible School, often we advertise it with just the regular poster that comes with whatever the title of the theme is for that, but to advertise it with pictures of past Vacation Bible Schools where the audience sees Black children, white children, Asian children, pictures of them participating in Vacation Bible School, and makes them feel what I can let my child go there, and having your child go to Vacation Bible School is just a start on possibly having their family come to church.
It's an important point, making them
That's a
feel
good
welcome.
idea.
I know that when we do marketing materials at the university, we always had to make sure we include the mixed races and sexes in all of the publications that we put out.
Mhm.
To make
Girls have mentioned, we want to be the little white church. It's fun to be the little white church, but we don't want to be the little white church in that way. We want to be inclusive to anyone who wants to come.
right.
Okay.
Did we
go-
follow up with any of those vacation school families and issue a personal invitation to come visit our church? We enjoyed having their children there. I mean, I don't know.
We've done that in the past. We reached out to the family
okay.
from Vacation Bible School. We try to keep in contact with them. And they come to special events, trunk or treat.
That's another big
Come
one.
up and they'll say, "Oh, we love Vacation Bible School here." So
Oh, well, good.
Mhm. I think some of the ones who go to different Vacation Bible School too, a lot of them have their own church. They just go around to other churches too, to Vacation Bible School.
Good babysitting service.
I'm sorry, what?
It's a good babysitting service.
Yes. So, well, this brings us to chapter 16, which is about how does the church regain credibility over past mistakes the church has made, because the church in the past has promoted slavery. Now, I'm not saying every church, but the churches have. So how do we get past the mistakes that were made in the past? Are we still bound by those? I mean, sorry. Do we still need to let's see, it was a question 1 on page 173. Let's see what that question was. Oh yeah, in the 18th and first half of the 19th century, many churches in the United States supported the institution of slavery. Today, the church is often apathetic, and I think that's the biggest problem we have now, apathetic towards racism. How are supporting slavery and being apathetic towards racism similar, and how are they different?
Well, I think they're similar in that the churches would sort of turn a blind eye, if not even, in some instances being actively supporting racist ideologies and practices. But the similarity being just turning a blind eye and just sort of ignoring it.
I think if it doesn't affect us, a lot of people just do. Well, I'm guilty of that. Basically, just ignoring it. I like the fact that the Disciples of Christ has the reconciliation offering that they do, so that they do. Our church, regionally and nationally, are reaching out to try to bring reconciliation, and I think that's a very important work. Because the one they said here, it said, "We are Christ made physically visible to the world."
Those are
So
great.
how we act and behave and what we do is how the world sees Christ.
Just been bundled with my.
And that, so. Also, churches in the US, or the major denominations, a lot of them have a lot of decline, they're declining. There are not as many people attending. A lot of churches have shut down.
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Gina, as far as what the younger generation, a lot of them have some pretty strong ideals about what is right and what's wrong, and very high expectations for what the church should do. And when the church doesn't respond to that, or sort of turns a blind eye to it even, then the church loses a lot of credibility.
I think that's what the authors are saying, because they say that the church is growing in other parts of the world, fortunately, and ours just doesn't. We're becoming a much more secular society too. And that has a lot, I think, to do with it, that people just don't go to church anymore. Not that they don't believe in God, they just don't see the need for church.
One of the things I hear a lot from young people, especially millennials, is that they're looking for a church that is authentic, that's honest, that's not putting on airs.
Yeah.
But authenticity is kind of in the eye of the beholder also. I mean, what is authentic to one person is not necessarily seem authentic to another, and I think that's why you have so many different worship styles, in various churches, because something seems more authentic to some people. So anyway. And so do outsiders fail to see Christ at work in the church, you think, when we don't address racism and don't address some of the social problems in our country today?
I think so.
When I was reading this, the first thing I thought about was, when God gave the Israelites the 10 Commandments and the law. Well, the Pharisees and the scribes went and added a whole lot more laws to be included that everyone needed to follow. And the following of the law became more important than the idea behind it. And I think in many churches, we've just kind of gone in the footsteps of the Pharisees, making more do's and don'ts and things like that, anyway, coming from a fundamentalist background, I do see that. That if you haven't come from that, you might not quite see the.
In our study of Matthew, one of the with the Sermon on the Mount, one of the things that was mentioned was that Jesus is one of the, of all religions, Christianity with Jesus is the only one where the golden rule is in positive form. He is saying, Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And with most other religions, and they went to Buddhist and Hindu and everything, they have something similar to the golden rule, but they say, don't do bad things to others. They don't say what you need to do. They say don't what you don't do. You know, don't kill, don't do this. Jesus said, do unto others. So it's more of an action of our goal is to serve and not just don't do bad things. It's not what we don't do, it's what we do and the good that we do. That was, I think, important to actually kind of realize that it was only Jesus who said it in the positive form. So
I didn't realize that.
we
That's
have a
very,
lot of responsibility as Christians, you know, to be active in making things in active in how we serve, and not just by not doing this.
mhm. No, I hadn't really ever thought about that, but you're right. It's not about just, you know, don't be mean to other people because you don't want people to be mean to you, but you want other people to be nice to you. You want other people to be friendly, you know, and other things like that. And you need to do those same sort of things for other people. My final question, and the one which I have no answer: what can a white church do to combat racism? What can Bonaire Christian Church do to combat racism?
I've been in the background and very quiet because unfortunately mine goes to things very deeply and very complex, and so I don't know how to talk about it. But I think one thing is maybe we need to step back and take a look at the picture that we're painting of ourselves, and we truly are basically an all-white congregation and all that. And I don't think any one of us have ever said we don't want any other races to come to our church. I think maybe we need to focus on our understanding of Christ's teachings and follow that golden rule. And if that results in one black family coming or 10 black families coming or whatever it results in, Asian Americans, Mexicans, whatever, then I think we've done our job. Maybe I'm being a little bit of looking for an out here, but some of the attempts to address racism by inviting people does seem artificial to me. If you
The ones
truly,
who are talking about an authentic, you know, they want an authentic church.
right,
If you're doing that sort of thing, it's really not authentic. And even the ones in the book say this isn't going to happen overnight. This is a long haul thing, and that the eventual goal is that we will be a much more integrated society than we currently
well, the other
are.
problem we have is that all too quickly, we are individuals, and you mentioned early on, I heard you say that we are many different political views, and sometimes very strongly so, sometimes not so strong. And when you get into this matter, when you step into this, you're also stepping into politics and who you support and what you support and so forth. So you may not do that openly, but in your heart, you're making those decisions. And that isn't a bad thing. It's just based on what your beliefs are and support. I'm just not very good at that. And I don't like confrontation.
No, I don't either.
And so I think we have people in our church who I'm quite sure have been on the front lines in various marches and supporting different causes. Other people, I'm kind of like Claire said, she's greeting people, you know, in a way it's like whatever that action is, it's like, gosh, I would die 10 times over before I would get involved in the front line of one of these marches. You know, and that doesn't mean I don't support the cause in a way. I'm just not that kind of person.
One thing that I've really loved is, and I think we might expand on that a little bit, is having the young Black man who plays the harp, having his music at our church, even though it's on, I think he's actually been there to play the harp in a live service.
Yes.
And then the recordings, but thinking about how we might bring music from other cultures in, since we're recording them anyway,
We're his friends.
you know, and having other, you know, having people come and play music and introduce the congregation in that way and introduce the church to those people too.
Have you ever thought of
And
introducing?
yet I, you know, and yet Bud and I were talking the other day, and we said, we really don't know this boy, and we really don't know his family and where he came from and how did he start playing the harp for our church. And so maybe a story in our newsletter all about him and his study of the harp, or somehow introducing him and getting his face in the newsletter, you know, for everyone to see, and learning more about him. So we can, next time he comes, he just won't be someone playing a harp. He'll be, and he might already, many of you might already know him. I'm saying, I'm ignorant of it. I'm ignorant of him or his story.
There was an article when he first started playing, but that has been a while back. And I had just put his picture in the newsletter for this upcoming newsletter. But and his dad and mom usually bring him, and he's played in person for Saturday service several times. And his dad, when he was here last time, when they were recording, I learned that he likes to preach some. So I said, well, come on over and preach for us one Saturday too. So we may yet make some more connections, but I'm pretty sure they're very active in their church.
Earlier tonight, we were talking about how do you reach out to young people, and somebody said, maybe it was the book, but you have to meet them where they are.
Yeah, Dave.
I don't think it's about bringing Black people into our church.
Right.
We want to combat racism, we want to get to know Black people, go to them.
Mhm.
Maybe what we need to do is partner with an African-American church and arrange to have a listening conference where we go in and talk with them and hear their stories and hear what it's like to be a Black person today. And not say, oh, come on over to Bonaire, let's go to them.
Mhm.
But it has to be more than 3 people.
But could it also be us volunteering? And I'm a good one to talk about this because I obviously can't do the commute. But let's say we volunteer to participate in a work day that they're having at their church. And I think during a work day, it's a more social thing, and you get a chance to, you know, interact with people, and then, you know, maybe later on they would want to reciprocate and, you know, come and participate in an event that BACC had.
I like that.
Mhm.
I have thought about that and trying to figure out ways to partner. And the only Black church that I've known that's near us, I think is on Rockaway, Old Bonaire Road. So I have driven up to go past that church quite a few times, but I never see any cars there or anyone there when I'm going past. So hopefully
The
one of
little
these
white
days-
one on the left side, like you're going into, yeah. I know it's, when I was, I guess, maybe I don't know. I was either in high school or college. It was quite a while ago. There was a Black disciple church in Winston-Salem. And so First Christian, the white church in Cleveland Avenue, the Black church, we did get together for a number of activities, and we had that common ground that we were all disciples. And so there were common features to our worship services in terms that we all had communion every Sunday and, you know, and that kind of thing. But we learned a lot, and there were a lot of relationships that were established, and I still know folks the the Black church, unfortunately, in recent years fell apart for a number of reasons, and that there was a lot of sadness in the first Christian folks about that because they had that history of those contacts and those relationships with that.
I do have a meeting set up with the, what's he called? The bishop for the Piedmont district. He is meeting with me and Bill Spangler Dunning. So we'll see where our conversation goes, and I'll find out the closest Black church to us, because there's not any in Richmond now.
Two ideas that come to mind that may help would be more involvement with something like Habitat for Humanity, which crosses all kinds of racial barriers, and just be a presence from Bonaire Christian Church that helps, and see where that leads. The other one is, I know there are periodically, I have known some people involved, and there are Black cemeteries that have been just desecrated and abused and forgotten about, and nobody knows much about them, and there are projects ongoing to restore those things. And it may be that Bonaire Christian Church just shows up and, or, coordinate with those people, but make it known that here's a presence from Bonaire Christian Church that is willing to help. And don't make a big deal out of some artificial connection. Just go help and see what that leads to.
Mhm. Right.
I think another thing, well, Brenda and I were talking about on Monday a lot. There's a lot of Blacks who come to regional and national events for Disciples of Christ. So if you went to these meetings, you would meet more people of color that are disciples. So that's another idea, to try to get more people to attend.
Right, because the Black churches in Virginia, they have their own configuration called the Piedmont District. Cindy was referring to it earlier, but they also actively participate in the Virginia region. And in fact, our regional moderator right now is a Black minister. So there, yeah, at regional events, and our national minister, our general minister now is a Black woman. So the disciples are pretty integrated at that regional and national level. Yeah, pretty exciting.
But part of that too could be, I've never been to a Black Disciples of Christ worship service. I'm imagining that it's different than our service. How the service is held. I don't know.
Yeah,
sure.
it's
I haven't
a
been.
little different. Yeah,
So-
and I sort of got, when I was working on the regional women's retreat, disciple women's retreat a few years ago, and planning stuff, and I was mindless about incorporating worship traditions from the Black churches. All the worship services I planned were all white traditions. The first year, the second year I did it. We did it differently, and one of the things that really struck me in the face is the white women, we all needed the words to the hymns. We needed them printed in the bulletin if we didn't have the hymn books. The Black women, they knew all the words for all the hymns. They didn't even use the words, and the white women were all like, So that was one of the big differences I saw. In the music, some of the songs are different, but there were a lot of common songs too.
Mhm.
If I ever do it again, I will have a much broader perspective about blending together the two worship traditions.
But I think that is one of the barriers to integrating churches, is the different worship traditions of what people.
And nobody wants to give up the traditions that they are so familiar with, right?
Yeah, I remember, the guy from Mozambique that Bernie worked with, his name was Joe Satoli, and he comes to Bernie and says, "How long are your services?" And he goes, "And do they pass the offering plate 2 and 3 times?" It was, and that, so apparently it's different than what he was used to. But anyway, because he had married an American, African American woman, and don't know if they're Baptist. I can't remember what denomination, but he went to church with her, and then he was just saying it was just wasn't what he expected, and wondered if our churches were the same way. So that's like when Bernie and I got married. That's the shortest wedding that any of Bernie's relatives have ever been to. They'd never been to a Protestant wedding before, so it was.
Right, 'cause that's, you know, among whites, that's a huge divide between Protestant and Catholic, different worship traditions.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, then it's long. Because it was a shock to me. The first Catholic wedding I went to is like, when is this going to end? Yeah. But anyway, that's we all have different traditions that that we're comfortable with and things like that. And I don't think there's necessarily wrong with that. There's no way we could have one church building that would hold everybody in town. You're always going to have it broken up into smaller groups, even if we all did the exact same things. Otherwise, we'd be meeting in a stadium, and that's really impersonal. So it's so anyway. Any other comments or anything? Well, I didn't think we're going to be able to do it. We only have 3 more chapters, and we will cover those next Wednesday. So we'll finish the book and that. Okay. And I've really enjoyed this with everybody because everyone has a lot of different background than I do, and have more experience in things. And I've really enjoyed that. And that's the reason I really enjoyed the book too. It's just a completely different perspective that I was totally unaware of.
So you all think about what book you'd like to study next?
Well, one of the things I was wondering is between now and next week, if that's the last one, that maybe we might have 2 or 3 recommendations that we, after studying this book, that we might put forward to either Church and Society or that type of thing, some kind of an action that we can take just to make some recommendations to the church, to Bonaire Christian Church. So just think about that.
I like it. All right.
Well, one of the other books I looked at when Cindy gave me books to look through, it was called Be the Bridge. And that was very good too. It was written by, I don't know if she's an actual minister, but she worked in the church, a Black woman. And so I ended up choosing this one because I thought since we're basically a white church, it'd be nice to have more perspective, but you get a lot more detail and some stuff in hers. And they form Be the Bridge Society. I mean, groups that meet, and her suggestion is that when you first meet on one of these things, that whites don't say anything, you just sit and listen, let the Blacks have their say, say what they want to say, and you just listen, really listen. And that's so, and to have whites in the minority in the group is another thing she thought was important too. So I think maybe that's so maybe the Blacks would feel more comfortable actually speaking out and, saying what they think if they're not in the minority in those things. So there are other books on, on this topic too. So anyway, okay. Well, everyone have a nice day. I think the weather's supposed to be nicer tomorrow than it was today. So looking forward to that, and I'll see y'all next Wednesday, and we should be able to finish up the book before Easter. So